Welcome to the next installment of my video lecture series for Principles of Macroeconomics or Macroeconomic Principles. And in this particular video, I'm going to take a look at the labor market and contrast two different views about how the labor market actually performs. First, we're going to take a look at the classical school, and then we'll contrast that with the notion of sticky wages, i.e. that wages will not adjust very quickly to changes in the labor market. So we're going to take a look here, and we can see that again we have a market in equilibrium, and this is the labor market, and we're looking at the equilibrium wage rate, the price of labor, and the units of labor that are supplied and demanded at that equilibrium price of W0. So here we are in equilibrium. It's where the supply and demand curves intersect one another, and that gives us an equilibrium wage of W0 and the units of labor in equilibrium of L0. So let's assume that there's some kind of change in the market and there's a decrease in the demand for labor. So the demand curve shifts to the left, and we relabel that as D1. And what occurs is we will have a new equilibrium. Our original equilibrium is where D0 intersected S0. Our new equilibrium is going to be where the new demand curve D1 intersects S0. So that new equilibrium, we're going to have an equilibrium wage rate of W1 and an equilibrium quantity of labor equal to L1. So what occurs is that the equilibrium wage rate will fall, and we will go back to full employment, because at that W1, the demand for the quantity of labor demanded is exactly equal to the quantity supplied. So this is what the classical school believes. The classical school believes that markets tend to move towards equilibrium relatively quickly. It's not an instantaneous adjustment from W0 to W1, but eventually we move to a lower wage rate under this scenario where D1 shifts, the demand curve D0 shifts to the left, and now we have D1. So realize that about the classical school is that when they talk about the labor market, that wage rates will adjust to get us to a full employment equilibrium, that there will be no unemployment, that the wages will adjust so that the quantity demanded of labor and the quantity supplied of labor is going to be equal to one another. Now, if we contrast that with another look at this, so we have the classical school right here, we could contrast this with a similar scenario where we assume that the wages do not adjust and where wages are quote-unquote sticky. Economists would say that the wages are sticky, that it does not adjust to a new equilibrium. So let's go through the same scenario where the demand curve shifts to the left, and we relabel the demand curve D1 to signify the difference between D0 and D1. So here we have a new demand curve. There's been a change in the labor market. But if we assume that wages are sticky, the wages will not adjust downward. We will not move from this equilibrium point, the original one, to this new equilibrium point, because the wages themselves will not adjust downward. We're assuming that the wages are sticky. What will occur? Well, if we follow W1 to the demand curve, that gives me the quantity of labor that is demanded, and L0 is still the amount that is being supplied. So we have people who want to work at W0 but cannot find jobs because companies do not want to hire them at that wage rate. So L0 people want to work at the wage rate, but companies only want to hire L1. So the difference between the two is the unemployment that occurs. So if we subtract L1 from L0, that will tell us the number of people who are unemployed at W0. So at W0, we have more people wanting to work at the prevailing wage rate than companies actually want to supply. So this is what is referred to as sticky wages, that the wages do not adjust downward to the new equilibrium. They stay, or they're stuck at the original equilibrium rate, and we end up having unemployment because of this. So make sure you're comfortable with the two different notions. The classical school assumes that we would move from the original equilibrium to a new equilibrium relatively quickly, whereas in the real world, sometimes we observe that wages are sticky, that they don't adjust downward. And what I usually tell my students is, you can imagine, for example, that if you were working and your boss came to you and said, well, listen, the company's not doing very well, we're going to have to cut your salary. We're going to cut your salary from $25 an hour to $20 an hour. People probably won't instantaneously accept that pay cut. It might take them a little bit of time to. Some of them might say no and get laid off. Some of them, after working through their options, might accept it, but it would take them a little bit of time to accept that lower wage rate. The fact that the wages are sticky themselves means that we are not going to move from one equilibrium to another relatively quickly, and because of the fact that wages don't adjust downward, some unemployment is going to occur when the demand for labor decreases.